Jake Harrison stood by the large window of the space station, looking down at the planet below. New Meridian looked peaceful from up here. The planet had been humanity's home away from Earth for 23 years now. More than 2 million people lived down there, building cities and farms, raising families, and living their dreams among the stars. Jake was a commander in the Defense Forces. His job was to keep everyone safe. Today felt like any other day. He watched the planet turn slowly, showing off its beautiful amber and violet skies. Next to him, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was checking the daily reports on her tablet. Her dark hair was tied back neatly and she looked focused on her work. "Everything looks normal, Commander," Amy said without looking up. "All the ships are on time. The farms are doing great. Just another boring day." Jake smiled a little. "Boring is good, Amy. When things are boring, people are safe and happy." He should not have said that. As soon as the words left his mouth, everything changed. Chief Technician Greg Palmer's voice came through the speakers, and he sounded worried. "Commander, we have ships coming into our space. A lot of ships. They're not telling us who they are." Jake walked quickly to the main screen with Amy right behind him. The holographic display showed dozens of unknown ships appearing out of nowhere. They were huge, with sharp angles and dark metal. The ships were moving straight toward New Meridian, and they looked ready for a fight. "Try to talk to them," Jake ordered. "Use all the normal greeting messages." Greg tried everything. He sent messages in every language humanity knew. He used every frequency and code. But the alien ships stayed silent. They just kept coming, getting closer and closer to the planet. Their weapons were starting to glow with power. "Sir, they won't answer us," Greg reported, "and they're getting ready to shoot." The attack came fast and without warning. Bright beams of energy shot through space and hit the defense station's shields. Everyone stumbled as the station shook. Alarms started screaming through the halls. Jake could hear the sounds of metal breaking as the lower parts of the station got damaged. "Everyone to battle stations," Jake shouted, holding onto the railing as another blast hit them. "Call the planet. Tell them to get people to safety now." But the aliens were already attacking the planet too. Smaller ships broke away from the big ones and flew down through the atmosphere. They headed straight for the cities. Jake watched in horror as the first city's protective shields failed. Buildings fell down. Fires started spreading everywhere. People ran through the streets trying to find shelter that would never be strong enough against such powerful weapons. Lieutenant Carlos Bennett, who controlled the station's weapons, fired back with everything they had. Missiles flew toward the enemy fleet. Guns tracked and shot at the alien ships. For a moment, Jake felt hope when one enemy ship exploded in a bright flash of light. But there were too many of them. For every alien ship they destroyed, 10 more kept attacking. The defense station shook again as its main power source took a direct hit. "We're losing power," Greg yelled over all the noise. "Shields are down to 15%. Amy grabbed Jake's arm. "Commander, we need to leave. This station won't last much longer." Jake looked at the screen one last time. The alien ships had surrounded every major city on the planet. Their landing ships were already touching down. Whatever these creatures wanted, they had come prepared to take it by force. "Order everyone to the escape pods," Jake said quietly. "Send everything we learned to Earth. They need to know about this enemy." The defense station broke apart in a series of explosions as the last escape pods launched into space. Jake watched from his pod's small window as New Meridian disappeared behind smoke and fire. The planet they had built, the home they loved, was falling to an enemy they knew nothing about. The aliens moved through the cities like ghosts. They were tall creatures walking on 2 legs, covered in armor that seemed to swallow light. Where they walked, shadows followed them. The people who survived the first attack found themselves being hunted, captured and pushed into prison camps. In just 3 days, New Meridian belonged to the aliens. Jake's pod floated among the wreckage, sending out a distress signal into the darkness of space. Through the static of his emergency radio, he could hear the screams. He heard people calling for help. He heard the final words of people who had trusted him to protect them. Tears came to his eyes, but he could not stop them. "This is not over," he whispered into the darkness. "We will come back. I promise." Far away, a colonial transport ship that had escaped the attack turned toward Earth. Inside were 300 survivors. They all carried the same terrible message. Humanity had lost its first colony to an unknown enemy. Now the question was whether Earth would fight back or let it be the first of many losses. The survivors huddled together in the transport ship, trying to make sense of what had happened. Some cried, Some sat in shocked silence. Others tended to the wounded, but they all shared the same look in their eyes. It was a look of loss, of fear, but also of anger. These aliens had taken their homes, their families, their lives. The survivors would make sure Earth knew what had happened. They would make sure humanity was ready to fight back. Jake's pod was eventually picked up by the transport ship. As he climbed aboard and saw the faces of the other survivors, he made a silent promise to himself and to them. He would find a way to take back New Meridian. He would make these shadow creatures pay for what they had done. And he would make sure that humanity never suffered such a defeat again. The journey to Earth would take weeks. But Jake knew that every day of that journey he would be planning. He would be preparing. And he would be getting ready for the day when humanity would return to New Meridian, not as victims but as warriors ready to reclaim what was theirs. 6 months had passed since New Meridian fell to the aliens. The tall tower of Earth's United Colonial Defense Headquarters stood in Geneva, looking out over a world that had changed forever. Humanity had reached for the stars with hope and wonder. Now they faced the hard truth that the universe was not as friendly as they had hoped. Colonel Lisa Hayes walked back and forth in the meeting room. Her boots made clicking sounds on the clean floor. Around the big table sat the survivors from New Meridian, including Commander Jake Harrison. His eyes looked tired and haunted, like he had seen too much pain. Also at the table were Admiral Kenneth Price, a tough military leader, and Dr. Helen Foster, the best scientist who studied alien life forms. "Show them," Admiral Price said, nodding to Helen. The lights went dim as holographic images filled the center of the room. It showed the aliens in clear detail. They were tall figures moving through smoke. Their bodies were covered in armor that seemed to move like liquid shadow. Their helmets had no visible eyes, but they could see perfectly well. "We are calling them the Voidborn," Helen explained. Her voice was steady even though the images were disturbing. "Based on what we have learned about their technology and how they fight, we believe they move from planet to planet. They do not stay and build homes. They take everything valuable and then leave." Jake's jaw got tight. "Take everything?" Helen nodded seriously. "Every piece of information says they strip planets of all resources and then move on. New Meridian had rare minerals, lots of water and plants and animals. To them, it was just something to take. Then we take it back," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez said from her seat next to Jake. She had lost her whole family in the invasion. Her voice had an edge that everyone understood. Admiral Price leaned forward. His weathered face looked serious. "That is why you are here. Earth's government has approved Operation Shadowbreak. We are building a military fleet designed specifically to take back New Meridian and drive the Voidborn away from human space." Lisa stopped walking and faced the group. "We have spent 6 months studying everything we know about these creatures. Their shields, their weapons, how they fight. We have taken apart pieces of their destroyed ships and learned what we could. We have built weapons to fight them. This will not be like the first battle. We will be ready this time." She pressed a button and a new hologram appeared showing sleek warships being built in space stations above Earth. "The fleet will have 40 ships, 12 heavy cruisers, 20 destroyers, and 8 carrier groups. We are calling it the Reclamation Fleet." Jake looked at the ships, noticing their sharp designs and heavy weapons. "When do we leave?" 3 months, Admiral Price replied. "We need that time to finish building the ships and train the crews. Commander Harrison, you will help us plan the battle. Your knowledge of New Meridian and the first invasion is very important." "I want more than just planning," Jake said. His voice was low but firm. "I want to be on the ground when we take back the planet. Those people trusted me to protect them. I owe them more than sitting in a safe command center." Lisa and the Admiral looked at each other. Finally, Lisa nodded. "You will lead the Marine soldiers for the ground attack. Lieutenant Rodriguez, you will be his second in command." Amy sat up straight in her chair. Her face looked fierce and determined. "Yes, ma'am." Over the next months, Jake threw himself into training. He worked with the Marine units, learning urban combat and how to fight against alien weapons. He helped engineers design armor that could protect against void-borne energy weapons. He memorized every street, every building, every useful position that New Meridian had. At night, he still heard the screams from that terrible day. Dr. Helen Foster spent her time in the research labs, looking at the strange technology of the Voidborn. The pieces recovered from destroyed ships did not follow normal science rules. Their armor absorbed light and energy, making them nearly invisible to regular sensors. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that could cut through ship walls like paper. But Helen found something important. The Voidborn had a weakness. Their technology worked by channeling energy into their power cores. If you hit those cores with too much power at once, their whole system would fail and shut down. It is a weakness we can use, she explained to Lisa during a late-night meeting. If we can hit them with enough firepower in a short time, we can break through their defenses. Lisa smiled for the first time in weeks. Then that is exactly what we will do. As the departure date got closer, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly built carrier called Freedom's Call. The reclamation fleet stretched across the space around Earth. It was proof of humanity's determination. 40 warships, 15,000 people, all focused on one goal. Amy came to stand beside him at the window. Do you think we can do it? Jake watched the ships moving into formation. Their lights made patterns against the stars. We have to. Those people down on Earth, the survivors, everyone who lost someone at New Meridian, they are counting on us. The Voidborn think they can take whatever they want. It is time we showed them they are wrong. For New Meridian, Amy said softly. For New Meridian, Jake repeated. The fleet jumped to faster than light travel the next morning, leaving Earth behind. Ahead was a journey of 3 weeks and a battle that would decide whether humanity could stand against the darkness, or whether they would become just another extinct species in an uncaring universe. Inside the ships, soldiers checked their weapons and armor. Engineers made final adjustments to the engines and shields. Doctors prepared medical bays for the wounded they knew would come. Everyone had a job to do and everyone understood what was at stake. Jake spent his time going over the battle plans again and again. He studied maps of New Meridian, looking for any advantage they could use. He talked with the Marine commanders, making sure everyone understood their roles. He worked with Helen to understand the Voidborn technology better, looking for any other weaknesses they could exploit. Amy organized the ground troops, dividing them into teams and assigning objectives. She made sure everyone had the right equipment and training. She knew that many of them would not come back from this mission, but she also knew they were willing to pay that price. The 3 weeks of travel felt both too long and too short. Too long because everyone was eager to reach New Meridian and start the fight. Too short because they all knew what waited for them at the end of the journey. Finally, the day came. The fleet prepared to drop out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Meridian system. Jake stood on the bridge of Freedom's Call, surrounded by his team. He looked at their faces and saw determination, fear, courage, and hope all mixed together. Whatever happens out there, Jake said to them, remember why we are here. We are here for the people who died. We are here for the people still trapped down there. We are here to show the universe that humanity does not give up. We fight for what is ours. The ship shuddered as it dropped back into normal space. Through the windows, they could see New Meridian in the distance. It looked different from how Jake remembered it. Darker, scarred. But it was still home, and they had come to take it back. The reclamation fleet appeared at the edge of the New Meridian system, far enough from the planet to stay hidden but close enough to see what was happening. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the Freedom's Call, staring hard at the screens in front of him. Scanning the system now, said Lieutenant Chris Morgan, the ship's sensor officer. His fingers moved fast across the controls as information poured in. I am picking up lots of Voidborn ships around New Meridian, counting at least 30 big warships and twice as many smaller support ships. Admiral Kenneth Price, leading the fleet from the heavy cruiser Titan's Reach, appeared on the main screen. They have brought in more ships. They are planning to stay for a while. Colonel Lisa Hayes, working from the command ship Warhawk, added her thoughts. We expected this. The question is whether they know we are here yet. No, Chris confirmed. We are too far away for their sensors. They are still flying in their normal defense patterns. Jake looked at the holographic display showing New Meridian. Even from this far away, he could see the changes. Dark structures had been built all over the planet, huge buildings that had not been there before. The beautiful amber skies he remembered were now covered with dirty haze in several areas. They are taking everything from the planet, Dr. Helen Foster said from her station. Her voice was tight with anger. Those structures are processing facilities. They are pulling out all the valuable materials. Amy Rodriguez stood beside Jake. Her face showed nothing, but he knew her well enough to see the anger burning inside. Then we stop them. Admiral Price explained the battle plan. We will split into 3 groups. The first wave, led by Titan's Reach, will attack their space fleet and get their attention. The second wave will hit their weapons on the planet, clearing a path for the ground forces. The third wave, including Freedom's Call, will send the Marine soldiers directly to the surface. Our main job is to free the prisoners, Lisa added. We believe the Voidborn are keeping human prisoners in 3 large facilities. We free them first, then we destroy the Voidborn presence piece by piece. Jake turned on his communicator. All Marine commanders, this is Harrison. Do your final equipment checks and be ready to go in 6 hours. We are going home. The 6 hours went by quickly. Jake put on his new combat armor, feeling its weight settle on his body. The armor was built specifically to fight the Voidborn. It had reflective plates to deflect energy weapons, enhanced strength to carry heavy gear, and sensors that could detect the Voidborn even when they were hard to see. Amy checked her weapon. A plasma rifle tuned to the exact settings that Helen had found would work best. Around them, 200 Marines did the same things, each getting ready mentally for what was coming. Are you scared? Amy asked quietly. Very scared, Jake admitted. But that is good. Fear keeps you sharp and alive. The battle started with a flash of light as the first wave of the reclamation fleet dropped their stealth and opened fire. The Voidborn space fleet scrambled to respond, their ships turning fast to face the surprise attack. Energy beams and missiles flew across space in a deadly dance. On the Titan's Reach, Admiral Price directed the assault with practiced skill. Focus all fire on their command ship. If we can take out their leader, the rest will have trouble fighting. The Voidborn fought with scary precision. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, but humanity had learned from the first battle. The reclamation fleet's ships worked in teams, focusing their fire to break through shields one target at a time. One by one, Voidborn ships exploded in silent balls of fire. Second wave, you are clear, Admiral Price sent the message. Take down those planet weapons. Lisa's command ship led the attack on the huge weapon platforms the Voidborn had put in orbit. These stations were designed to stop exactly this kind of counterattack, covered with enough firepower to destroy smaller ships. But the Warhawk and its escorts came in fast and low, using New Meridian itself as cover. All guns, fire, Lisa ordered. The stations died one by one, their wreckage falling down through the atmosphere. Jake watched from the Freedom's Call as the last platform exploded, opening the way for the ground assault. Third wave, you are up, Admiral Price announced. Good luck down there. Jake climbed into the drop pod with 9 other Marines, including Amy. The pod was cramped with barely enough room to breathe, but it would get them to the surface fast. As the launch started, he took one last look at his team. Remember your training. Watch each other's backs, and let's bring our people home. The pod launched with huge force, pushing Jake back into his seat. Through the small window, he watched as dozens of other pods streaked toward New Meridian, their heat shields glowing orange as they hit the air. Enemy fire reached up to meet them, but the Marine pilots were skilled, dodging between the energy beams. The ground rushed up fast. The pods' reverse rockets fired at the last moment, softening the impact as they slammed into the edge of what had once been the colonial capital of New Haven. The door blew open, and Jake was moving before it hit the ground. New Haven was not recognizable. The shining towers had been knocked down to rubble, replaced by dark Voidborn structures that seemed to drink in the light. Smoke hung in the air and the sounds of distant fighting echoed through the ruins. Form up, Jake commanded. Rodriguez, take the front. We are heading for Prison Zone Alpha. The Marines moved through the destroyed city in tactical formation, their sensors looking ahead for enemies. They found the first Voidborn patrol 3 blocks from where they landed. The aliens stood 7 feet tall in their shadow armor, their weapons humming with energy. Contact, Amy hissed, dropping behind a broken wall. Fire, Jake ordered. The plasma rifles lit up the street with bright blue light. The focused fire did exactly what Dr. Foster had predicted, overloading the Voidborn shields. The aliens stumbled, their armor flickering, and then fell as the Marines kept shooting. Keep moving, Jake urged. They had a long way to go, and the Voidborn would come in force once they realized humans had returned to take back what was theirs. They moved deeper into the ruined city, seeing more signs of what the Voidborn had done. Buildings had been torn apart for their materials. Streets were scarred from heavy machines. The beautiful parks were now just dead ground. But Jake also saw signs of resistance. Messages scratched on walls. Hidden caches of supplies. The colonists had not given up without a fight. 2 more blocks, Amy reported, checking her tactical display. A void-borne energy beam suddenly cut through the air where Jake's head had been a second before. He dove for cover as more aliens appeared from the shadows. There were at least a dozen this time, and they had the high ground. Suppressing fire, Jake shouted. Grenades on my mark. The Marines laid down a wall of plasma fire while 3 soldiers prepared grenades. Mark, Jake called out, and the grenades flew through the air. The explosions rocked the street, and when the smoke cleared, the void-borne position was destroyed, but more were coming. Jake could see movement in the distance. Lots of movement, double time, he ordered. We need to reach that prison zone before they can surround us. The Marines ran through the streets, fighting when they had to, avoiding combat when they could. Every minute counted. Every second brought them closer to their goal. Above them, the battle for New Meridian's orbit continued to rage. Ships exploded. Weapons fired. People fought and died on both sides. But slowly, surely, humanity was winning. Jake could see the prison zone ahead now. Tall walls surrounded it, guard towers at each corner. Inside those walls were people who had been waiting 6 months for rescue. People who had never given up hope. Almost there, Jake said into his communicator. Get ready to breach. The real fight was about to begin. The prison zone sat in the heart of what used to be New Haven's cultural district. Jake Harrison led his Marine group through the ruined streets, using the broken buildings for cover as more void-borne patrols appeared. The aliens had clearly figured out that humans had returned, and they were responding with brutal force. Eyes up, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez called out, her rifle pointing at movement along a collapsed bridge. 3 targets, high position. The Marines scattered as energy beams cut through the air where they had been standing. Sergeant Paul Martinez fired back, his plasma rifle painting the darkness with blue light. 1 void-borne fell, its armor finally breaking under the constant fire. The other 2 pulled back into the shadows. They are learning, noted Corporal Nina Wells, the squad's tech expert. She was monitoring void-borne communications on frequencies Dr. Helen Foster had found. They are calling for more soldiers. Jake checked his tactical display. 24 friendly markers showed other Marine units moving toward the prison zones from different directions. Above them, the space battle continued, flashes of light visible even through the smoke-filled air. Then we move faster, Jake decided. We hit the prison zone before those extra soldiers arrive. They reach the edge 10 minutes later. The place was surrounded by tall walls made of the same light-absorbing material that the void-borne armor used. Guard towers stood at regular points, each housing at least 2 aliens. Inside, according to their information, were 1,500 human prisoners, survivors who had been forced to work extracting resources for their captors. Nina, can you get us through that wall? Jake asked. The corporal studied the structure through her visor's special vision. Give me 2 minutes with the plasma cutter. But the second I start, every void-borne nearby will know we are here. Do it. Everyone else, defensive positions. We are about to have company. Nina went to work while the Marines spread out, creating overlapping fields of fire. Jake contacted the other units. Harrison to all teams. We are breaking into Zone Alpha. Expect heavy fighting. How is your situation? Captain Frank Butler's voice came back from Zone Beta. We are meeting strong resistance, but we are pushing through. We will have our people out in 15 minutes. Major Susan Clark, leading the assault on Zone Gamma, reported similar progress. Across New Haven, humanity was fighting to take back what they had lost. The plasma cutter burned through the wall with a high-pitched sound. Nina worked carefully, cutting a door-sized opening while the Marines waited tensely. The first void-borne appeared 3 minutes later, coming from the ruins like ghosts. Here they come, Amy warned. The battle erupted in a storm of energy fire. The Marines had learned from the first invasion. They fought in coordinated groups, concentrating their fire to punch through void-borne shields. But the aliens were learning too, using their superior speed to flank and divide the human forces. Sergeant Martinez took an energy beam to the shoulder. His armor turned black from the impact. He fell back, still firing, while Corporal Danny Shaw dragged him to cover. Medic, Danny shouted. Almost through, Nina reported. Sweat was visible on her face despite the armor's cooling system. Jake threw a plasma grenade toward a group of advancing void-borne. The explosion lit up the street, buying them precious seconds. Amy, take half the squad and be ready to go in. The rest of us will hold here. Got it, Amy replied, already moving. She pulled 6 Marines with her, positioning them at the nearly finished hole in the wall. The wall finally gave way with a groan of twisted metal. Through the opening, Jake could see the inside of the prison zone. Rows of temporary buildings housing the prisoners and dozens of void-born guards turning toward the hole in surprise. "Go," Jake ordered. Amy and her team poured through the opening, their weapons blazing. The void-born inside scrambled to respond, but they had been caught off guard. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, clearing the area section by section while Jake's group held the entrance. "Friendlies, don't shoot," Amy called out as she reached the first building. The door was locked with alien technology, but Nina had given them codes to override it. The door hissed open, showing thin men and women in torn colonial clothing, their eyes wide with disbelief. "We are United Colonial Marines," Amy told them. "We are here to get you out. Stay low and follow our orders." Word spread quickly through the prison zone. Prisoners came out of the building, some crying, others just staring in shock. There were far fewer than intelligence had said. Barely 700 people where there should have been 1,500. "Where are the others?" Amy asked one prisoner, a middle-aged man named Peter Quinn who had been a teacher before the invasion. Peter's face darkened. "The Voidborn took them. They have been removing people every week, taking them to the processing facilities. We don't know what happens there, but no one ever comes back." Jake's blood ran cold. They had hoped to save all the prisoners, but if the Voidborn were killing them, then time was even more critical than they had thought. "We need to move," Jake said into his communicator. "Amy, get those people ready to leave. We are calling for pickup now." But the Voidborn had other plans. A huge force came from the city's depths, at least 100 aliens moving in perfect coordination. They surrounded Jake's position, cutting off any easy escape. "All units, this is Harrison," Jake sent the message. "We are trapped at Zone Alpha with evacuees. We need help immediately." Colonel Lisa Hayes responded from orbit. "Harrison, we are seeing a large Voidborn force coming to your position. Transport ships are on the way. Arrival in 8 minutes. Can you hold?" Jake looked at the advancing enemy, then at the scared civilians coming out of the prison zone. 8 minutes might as well be forever. "We will hold," he said simply. "We did not come this far to fail now." The Marines formed a defensive circle around the evacuees, their weapons ready. The Voidborn began their assault, and the street turned into chaos. Energy beams and plasma fire crossed the ruined cityscape. Buildings collapsed. The ground shook from explosions, but the Marines held their ground. Every time a Voidborn pushed forward, focused fire drove it back. When Sergeant Martinez's position was overrun, Corporal Shaw pulled him back while Amy and her team covered them. When ammunition ran low, they took supplies from fallen comrades and enemies. Jake fought alongside his people, his rifle hot in his hands. 6 minutes. 7. A Voidborn beam caught his shoulder, spinning him around, but his armor held. He kept firing. Then the sky lit up with the roar of engines. The transport ships came down like saviors, their door guns raking the Voidborn positions. Marines poured out, reinforcing Jake's battered unit and creating a corridor to the ships. "Move, move, move!" Jake shouted, helping the evacuees toward the transports. The Voidborn pressed their attack, desperate to stop the humans from escaping, but now it was too late. The last Marine got on the transport ship as Voidborn forces closed in. The ship's engines screamed as it lifted off, energy beams burning its hull. Jake looked down at the prison zone, now empty of prisoners, and felt a grim satisfaction. They had done it. They had struck the first real blow against the Voidborn. As they climbed toward orbit, Jake saw other transports lifting off from zones Beta and Gamma. More prisoners freed, more lives saved, but he also saw the smoking ruins of New Haven, the scarred landscape and the dark Voidborn structures still standing. The battle was not over. Not by a long shot, but they had proven something important today. They had proven that humanity could fight back. They could rescue their own. And they would never stop until every last Voidborn was driven from their world. Inside the transport, the freed prisoners huddled together, many crying tears of relief. Some thanked the Marines. Others just sat in stunned silence, unable to believe they were finally free. Jake found a seat next to Amy, who was tending to her injuries. "We did good today," she said. "We did what we had to," Jake replied. "But there is more work ahead. A lot more." Through the window, he could see the Voidborn structures on the northern continent, massive facilities that dominated the landscape. That was where the aliens were really harvesting the planet's resources. That was their true target. And that was where the final battle would be fought. The space battle had reached a stalemate. The reclamation fleet had destroyed half the void-born ships, but the aliens fought with desperate determination, throwing themselves at the human ships with increasing fury. Admiral Kenneth Price coordinated from the Titan's reach, its hull scarred from multiple impacts but still working. "They are protecting something," Dr. Helen Foster observed from her analysis station. She had been studying void-born movements during the battle, noticing patterns. "Look at their formations. They are keeping us away from the northern continent." Colonel Lisa Hayes zoomed in on the tactical display. The northern continent was mostly empty of colonists but full of rare minerals. The Voidborn had built their largest facility there, a massive structure that dominated the landscape. "What is that?" Lisa asked. Helen ran tests on the facility, her eyes going wide as the results came back. "It is a harvester core. They are using it to extract resources at an incredibly fast rate, but the power readings are off the scale. If I am reading this correctly, they are preparing to strip mine the entire planet. Once they turn that device on at full power, New Meridian will be dead within weeks." Admiral Price's face hardened. "Then we destroy it." "How long do we have?" "Based on current power buildup, maybe 6 hours before full activation." "Not enough time for a normal assault," Lisa said. "We would need to fight through their entire defensive fleet and then somehow break into that facility." Jake Harrison listened to the conversation from the transport carrying him and the rescued prisoners back to Freedom's call. An idea formed in his mind, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only chance. "Admiral, this is Harrison," he sent the message. "I am looking at the same data Dr. Foster is seeing. That facility is their weak point. If we take it out, the Voidborn lose their reason for being here." "Agreed, Commander. But we already established that a frontal assault is not possible in the time we have." "Then we don't go through the front," Jake replied. "We go through the back. The Voidborn are focused on the space battle. A small team in stealth craft could reach the facility before they realize what is happening." There was silence on the channel as the command staff thought about his proposal. Finally, Admiral Price spoke. "It would be a one-way trip, Commander. Even if you succeeded in destroying the facility, getting out would be nearly impossible with the Voidborn presence in that region." Jake looked at Amy Rodriguez, who had been listening to the conversation. She met his eyes and nodded slightly. He turned to the other Marines in the transport. One by one, they signaled their agreement. "We understand the risks, sir. But if we don't do this, we lose New Meridian anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting." Lisa's voice was thick with emotion. "Jake, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I was there when New Meridian fell. I owe it to everyone who died to make sure it does not stay fallen." After another moment of silence, Admiral Price gave the order. "You are authorized for the mission, Commander. Freedom's call will provide stealth craft. You will have whatever equipment you need. Good luck." 2 hours later, Jake stood in the hangar bay of Freedom's call with a strike team of 20 Marines. They had been briefed on the mission. Infiltrate the harvester facility, plant enough explosives to destroy the core, and if possible, escape before the explosion. The last part was wishful thinking at best. Dr. Foster had given them detailed plans of the facility, created from sensor scans and what little they knew of Voidborn technology. The core was protected by multiple layers of armor and shielding, but there was a weakness. The power lines that fed the core ran through maintenance tunnels that were less heavily defended. "We plant charges along these lines," Jake explained, highlighting the route on a holographic display. "When they all blow at the same time, the feedback will overload the core. The explosion should be visible from orbit, and we will be inside when it goes off," Corporal Nina Wells noted. "That is why we move fast. 30 minutes to reach the core, 15 to plant the charges, 30 to get clear. We will have stealth craft standing by for pickup, but we need to create our own exit." Amy checked her rifle for the 10th time. "What about Voidborn inside the facility?" "Dr. Foster estimates minimal guards inside. Most of their forces are engaged in the space battle or defending the surface installations. We will have surprise on our side." They boarded 2 stealth craft, sleek ships designed to slip past sensors. The pilots were the best in the fleet, and they would need to be. The northern continent was covered with anti-aircraft defenses. The craft launched into the chaos of the space battle, immediately banking away from the fighting. They descended rapidly, using the planet's magnetic field to hide their signatures. Jake watched through the window as New Meridian's surface rushed up to meet them, the harvester facility growing larger with each passing second. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. The craft touched down in a rocky valley 2 miles from the facility. The Marines got out quickly, weapons ready, and began the approach on foot. The landscape was scarred from void-born industry. Once beautiful forests had been reduced to stumps and ash. They reached the facility's outer wall without meeting any resistance. Nina used her equipment to find a maintenance access, and within minutes they were inside. The interior was eerily quiet, lit by the strange glowing strips the Voidborn used instead of normal lighting. "This way," Jake whispered, following the route Dr. Foster had mapped out. They moved through corridors of dark metal, their footsteps muffled by their armor. Twice they met Voidborn technicians, and twice those aliens died before they could raise an alarm. The team pressed deeper into the facility, always heading toward the massive energy readings that marked the location of the core. Finally, they entered a vast chamber. The harvester core dominated the space, a sphere of writhing energy 50 meters across, held in place by massive power lines that glowed with barely contained power. The sight was both magnificent and terrible. "Start planning charges," Jake ordered. "We have 15 minutes. The Marines spread out, attaching explosive packs to the power lines. Nina worked on programming the detonators, making sure they would all go off at the same time for maximum effect. Jake stood guard, his eyes scanning for any sign they had been discovered. "Commander, we have a problem," Sergeant Paul Martinez called out. He was pointing at a display panel that none of them could read, but the flashing red symbols needed no translation. Helen Foster's voice came through their communicator. "Harrison, I am reading a massive power spike at your location. They have sped up the activation sequence. The core is going to full power in 10 minutes, not 6 hours, and can we stop it?" Jake demanded. "Not without destroying the facility, but if that core activates before you are clear, the energy release will kill everyone within 5 miles. Jake made his decision instantly. "Everyone out now. Nina, remote detonation on the charges. "They won't be as effective if we don't finish placing them all," Nina protested. "We are out of time. Move." The Marines ran for the exit, but they had barely reached the corridor when alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Voidborn soldiers poured from hidden rooms, their weapons firing. The retreat became a fighting withdrawal, the Marines laying down covering fire as they fell back toward the surface. Corporal Danny Shaw took an energy beam to the chest and fell. Sergeant Martinez grabbed him, refusing to leave anyone behind. They burst out of the facility into daylight just as the stealth craft appeared overhead. "Get to the pickup point," Jake shouted. "Nina, blow the charges." "We are not clear yet," she argued. "Do it." Nina triggered the detonation. Deep inside the facility, the explosives erupted along the power lines. The feedback tore through the harvester core's containment, and the stored energy had nowhere to go but out. The explosion was massive. The entire facility erupted in a pillar of fire that reached into the sky. The shockwave caught the fleeing Marines, throwing them like leaves. Jake felt himself lifted and hurled through the air, his armor barely protecting him from the heat and force. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the stealth craft's engines. Hands grabbed him, pulling him aboard. He saw Amy's face covered in soot but alive. He saw other Marines, fewer than had entered the facility, but alive. As the craft climbed toward orbit, Jake looked back at the mushroom cloud rising from the northern continent. The harvester facility was gone, along with the Voidborn's reason for staying. In orbit, Admiral Price watched the explosion on his displays. "All ships, the harvester is destroyed. Press the attack. Drive them out of our system." The Voidborn fleet, suddenly without purpose, began to pull back. Their ships turned and fled toward the outer system, pursued by the reclamation fleet. Within hours, the last alien ship had jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving New Meridian behind. The battle was over. Humanity had won. 3 days later, Jake stood on the surface of New Meridian in what remained of New Haven's Central Plaza. Around him, Marines and freed prisoners worked together to begin the huge task of rebuilding. The skies were clearing, showing hints of the amber sunset he remembered. Amy joined him, her arm in a sling from injuries in the facility explosion. "The Admiral says we lost 14 ships and almost 3,000 people, but we saved the colony," We sent the Voidborn,